My name is Matt Rollins, and I'm a consultant here in Singapore working in Southeast Asia. Robert Quinn had a great quote in one of his books, or a great line in one of his books. He said, "The days in which we live are like walking naked into the land of uncertainty." Now, that's a great visual, and don't get too visual, of the challenge of leadership in the times that we live. We have this fear of being vulnerable, of uncertainty, and dealing with the unknown. And that really is the challenge. That's the area that I focus on. That's the hardest area in the human psyche to be able to deal with and get comfortable with and learn how to walk through. Now, in learning to deal with the unknown and the uncertainty and the feelings that are associated with it in the leader, there's 5 keys. I like to think of it as like the 5 fingers on your hand. Each finger has a place, and they work together. If I want to grip something, I grip it. Each digit has a strength. And all you need to know is to lose or have a splinter or a sore on one of your digits, and you realize when you're trying to grip something how awkward it is. Well, there's 5 things that in my work in dealing with leaders and organizational change, there's 5 keys, there's 5 digits that all leaders struggle with and that we have to work with. And I'm going to give you very briefly those 5 digits. First one has to do with values. What values are you operating by? Not what do you talk about, but how do you live? There's the talked about values, and then there's the real values, those values that we live by, that we care about, that we're passionate about. The values that you operate by are the framework of integrity, of congruity, of authenticity. So you've got to know what values you're going to live by, what values you're going to relate by, what values are you going to build into your organization. Those are vital because those guide you when you don't know what else to do. You frame yourself out of the values that you operate from and you move into those. The second area has to do with being defensive. And one of the automatic, reactive, unconscious competencies that all of us have is when we feel vulnerable, we become defensive. Now, being defensive isn't wrong. It's actually a healthy strength or a capacity that all of us need. But where it gets us into trouble is when we become reactive, and it's automatic that in that reactive response, we shut down learning. And so what we've got to do is develop a strategy, a strength, a courage to walk into uncertainty, the unknown, with not a reactiveness. Because defensiveness puts other people on defensive, and then when you get into a defensive environment, your learning shuts down. Next area that leaders have to focus on is language, the words that they use. And the words that you use define how you're going to frame something and how you're going to relate to it. So recently I was working with a group of executives, and we were trying to figure out, looking at the way of, is this an opportunity or is this a problem? Now, what word you use will frame how you interact, engage the situation. The words that we use have a phenomenal power, and it's working with language, the power of words that gives us the power to communicate, to connect with people at a heart place, to limit defensiveness. Why? Because if I'm being congruent in my communication and using words that are authentic and real and life-giving, it'll be easier for me to build relationships. Fourth area deals with tension. How do you respond to tension? And again, tension puts us in defensive. Defensive limits my language. And again, I start to, bottom line, seek control. And control is not a mechanism that is always going to be effective in dealing with the uncertainty. Why? Because as soon as I think that control is my primary focus, that means my effectiveness is going to guarantee your ineffectiveness. Why? Because only one person can be in control at a time. It creates power and complications that don't need to be there. I go out of a learning mode and I go into a defensive mode, not by motive. You can have the best motive in the world and still be defensive. So how do you react to tension? What is tension to? truth be told, tension is actually needed in an organization. It's a sign of life, and it's kind of the light that goes on and says it's time to communicate. So working with tension, being comfortable with tension, and learning how to facilitate an appropriate amount of tension in your group, in your relationships, in the organization that will keep people engaged and moving forward. And the last area is really an attitude of inquiry. The assumption is I don't know everything. It's okay not to know everything. And the greatest tool that I have in my tool bag is the capacity to engage, to ask questions. What about? What if? Who? How? When? Sometimes why? Not always the most effective questions. But open-ended questions that get us engaged, that get me looking at it, framing it, seeing different points of view. And where defensive puts me in a judgmental or a standing back, a conservative role that limits my view and as one researcher said, I go into a downshifting mode. Inquiry puts me into a learning mode. I'm engaged, I'm exploring, I'm curious, I'm investigating. And as a leader, if you can work with those and develop those, there's no perfect way. They're the 5 digits that you need to get a handle on uncertainty, to get comfortable with the unknown, to be engaged with life. It's learning these 5 keys, these 5 digits, and learning to what your strengths are, how do you do this, what's the nature of what we're trying to do, that vision would be clear, and then working with these 5 keys to be able to pull you into a framework that allows you to be at least somewhat comfortable with the unknown and uncertainty. That's a thought for a day. I trust you have a great day. Thanks.